All right, guys, welcome. It's Friday, May 28th. This is the week ahead. My name is Dave Coker. Today, we're going to be looking at the finances for the Group of 10 industrialized nations, or sometimes it's called the G10. Now, these nations, it's a little misleading. They are, of course, industrialized and they have military alliances, but they're called the G10 because they've agreed to participate in an IMF program called General Arrangements to Borrow, or GAB. So when they're included in the G10, what they've done is they've agreed to lend the IMF, when needed, extraordinary funds above and beyond just background rates. It was established in the 60s. Originally, it had 8 members, called the G10 in 64. Actually, its 11th member was added then, Switzerland. Don't ask me. I don't come up with these names. I just read about them. Right. The group of the name, or pardon me, the name of the group remained the same, and we're going to take a look at it today in terms of balance sheets, national balance sheets, and just like every one of us has a balance sheet. What do we own? Our assets minus what are our liabilities. Every organization, every business, every charity, they have balance sheets as well. Nations have balance sheets. And we're going to look at the NIP, as it's called, the Net International Investment Position for the G10. And what we're going to do is we're going to sum up, or the IMF has done the hard work. We're going to take the look at the assets that they own. We're going to subtract the liabilities that foreigners own. And in other words, we're going to try and get an idea of whether this nation, each one of these members of the G10, is a net creditor or net debtor. And to rationalize it, I'm going to show you to you as a percentage of GDP. And again, it's just as if you and I were looking at our net worth, or unfortunately it might be our net liability. We wouldn't look at the absolute amount of money we have or that we owe. We would look at it as a function of our income, essentially, how much money we're making. Now, the data comes from the IMF. I'll drop it into the chat box downstairs, down below, and you'll be able to pick it up. And there's a lot more information there than what I've grabbed today. It's actually a very wonderful piece of data. So we're going to look at NIP as a percentage of GDP. And when we start out, we're going to look at these various nations. Now, I know what you're thinking because you guys are sharp. There's 12 countries down there. And I'm a troublemaker, as you know. I like to look at things differently. I like to question the status quo. So I'm going to include China because, as you guys know, regular listeners to this channel, I have great respect for China. My God, they do amazing things there. And they're getting a lot of negativity these days from the Western democracies. So we're going to include China there. When we take a look at NIP, what a surprise. We can go from 0 up to about 150. Oh, and we see negative numbers there. All right, let's dive into it. Let's see what's going on here. So we start off with Italy. Italy running 2%. It's good. They own more than they owe. Not exactly eye-popping, but it's there. It's an achievement to have positive NIP. Sweden, 18%. So they own 18% more than foreigners owe of them. Canada, 45%. Belgium, 45%. These socialist paradise, my God, look at that. They owe more than foreigners own of them. Japan, 74%. Germany, 76%. What do these two nations have in common? For decades, they ran chronic, or large, I should say, trade surpluses. Netherlands, whoops, sorry about that. Netherlands, really interesting with Netherlands, small nation, and yet they run a NIP as a percentage of GDP, 115%. Here's a little factoid for you. My wife is Dutch, and if you ever go to Netherlands, you're going to see farms, these hydroponic and warehouse, glass houses, these sunrooms all over the country. Why do they have them? Well, they're actually a very big agricultural exporting nation. The largest in the world is the United States. Second largest for agricultural exports, Netherlands, you guessed it. Switzerland, really fascinating that they're 117%. And we know that Switzerland is basically a nation where they really respect the value of currency and they don't like debt. I don't like debt either. I don't run any debt myself. Oh, look at this. My gosh. England, United Kingdom, negative 25%. France, negative 27%. And the big elephant in the room, the United States, negative 66%. In other words, foreigners own more assets in America than Americans do, negative 66%. It's really wild when you take a look at this. Now, guys, when we take a look at these nations, that have highly negative NIP. Really what's going on here is that they've run decades of current account deficits, meaning, and some people object when I'm this blunt, meaning they sold their assets off to foreigners, for want of a better phrase. When you look at the nations with highly positive NIPs, for decades they ran current account surpluses, and that gave them the ability to buy a significant amount of foreign assets. Now, guys, this is really exactly, I can't be any more simple about how this works. People do object. In my opinion, they try to obfuscate. And it's this straightforward, guys. Think about it. If you've got a lot of savings and you buy assets that produce wealth, you're in a radically different position than if you don't have savings and you're selling off your assets to individuals. You end up with negative net worth at that point. And when you express it as a function of your GDP, your salary, and other income, it might be surprisingly large. And China. Now, 15%, I have to admit, when I saw this data, I was a little bit surprised that China's NIP was well, it's 15%, and that's a positive. I was surprised it was so small. But here's the thing, guys. They're in it for the long game. They don't think short term. So give them time. I'm going to take a look at this data every year from now on. It's really, really wild taking a look at it. It's IMF's got a wealth of information up there. And as I said, I'll drop the link in the chat box below. And as for these highly negative nations, I guess there's one thing we could suggest to them. You got to reconsider your ways, what you're doing. No party like this lasts forever. It's really that simple. All right, guys, thanks very much for your time. Hope you have a really safe and profitable weekend. Take care.